Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to briefly describe the differences between a module, a package, a library, and a framework. I'm going to start with a module. A module in Python is basically a file that contains various Python functions and variables. A module is simply a Python file or a file that has got a .py extension. Even if you have an empty file, as long as it's got a .py extension, it's regarded as a Python module. It usually contains executable code. Next, let's look at a package. A package is a collection of modules. The difference between a package and a module is that a package also must contain a special file which is called __init __.py. This is very important because it acts as a flag to the Python interpreter to process such a file as the package. So any Python will look for any file that contains this init.py. If it sees that, it treats that as a package. The init file can be empty. You don't have to have anything in it, but Python checks for that in order to mark that file as a package. A library is basically a collection of packages, while a framework is a collection of libraries which contains tools that you can use to build different types of stuff or application. So within a framework, you have to work within the constraint of the framework. So basically a framework is designed, has the tools, but you have to use the tools in a certain way designed or specified by the framework. Hello and welcome to this video. What is Python? Python is an interpreted, high-level and general-purpose programming language. What is Python used for? Python can be used for general web development, for scientific computing and data science, for machine learning. Python is used in startup companies. Python can be used in fintech and financial industry. Python is used for software development. Python can be used in mathematics. Python can also be used in system scripting. To install Python, you have to visit the Python website. I've got the link displayed on the screen. This is the Python official website. To install Python, you have to download it. So under the downloads option, there are different downloads depending on your operating system. I'm going to be installing it on a Windows computer. If you are installing it on a Mac, you select the option for Mac OS or other related platforms. So I'm on a Windows, so the system has detected that I'm running a Windows, so it presents me with the option for Windows. As of the time I am recording this video, the current version is Python 3.8.5. So I'm going to click on this button to begin the download. You can see the download has started on the bottom left hand corner of my screen. So I'm just going to give it a few minutes to complete the download. The download has completed on the bottom left hand corner of my screen. So I'm just going to double click on it and that will start the installation. So this is the screen you get. I'm just going to minimize this so we can see. Make sure that this box that says add Python 3.8 to path, make sure you put a check on it. It's very important. And then click on this install now button and that will, you may get this prompt if you're on a Windows computer. Just click yes to allow and the installation will progress. Once the installation has completed, you get this message that says setup was successful. you can click to close the setup box. Once you have installed Python, you can check if it's definitely installed on your system. If you are using a Windows-based computer, on your command prompt, which is a Windows terminal, you type in the command python space -- version. If that returns the version you have installed, that means you have Python installed correctly. If you are using a Mac, the command will be python 3 space -- version. The reason you type Python 3 on a Mac is that Mac already has Python version 2.7 pre-installed. So if you want to check for version 3, you have to type in python 3 space -- version to return the version 3 you have installed. I've got my command prompt open, so I'm going to type in the command, which is python space -- version, and I'll press enter, and that has returned version 3.85, which indicates I have Python installed. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome to this video. What is Pygame? Pygame is a cross-platform Python library which is popularly used for video game development in Python. Cross-platform basically means you can use it on a Windows computer, on a Mac or Linux computer. Pygame includes computer graphics and sound libraries that are designed to be used with the Python programming language. There are two main fundamental concepts of game development. The first is the ability to draw and update an image continuously so that the image appears to be in a fluid motion. For example, if a player in the game moves to the right, you need to be able to draw the image or picture to the right to reflect the activity of that user. This makes the game appear in a fluid motion. The second concept is you need a game logic. The game logic basically determines how the game should work. This includes the player's input, the timer, and the other bits and pieces the game will need. We're going to install Pygame inside a virtual environment. I'm going to create my project directory on my desktop. So I'm just going to right click anywhere on my desktop and click new and click folder, and I'm just going to give the folder a name. I've called the folder Flappy_Bird. The next thing is to create a virtual environment inside the directory. So this is the project directory I've just created, and I've opened up my command prompt. If you are using a Mac, you can do this on your terminal. I've typed in cd to change directory to my desktop, and inside my desktop I have the directory called Flappy_Bird, which is a project name. Now that I have the directory navigated to, all I need to do now is create a virtual environment inside this Flappy_Bird directory on my desktop. To create a virtual environment, you type in python space -m space venv, which is the module that creates the virtual environment, and then you give your virtual environment a name. I've called my virtual environment my env, and then you press enter, and that will create a new folder inside the main project directory. If I open up the project directory, which you see the virtual environment I've just created called my env, the next thing to do is to activate the virtual environment. To activate the virtual environment, first of all change directory to the virtual environment, and then typed in the command scripts/activate. If I press enter, you can see the virtual environment is activated because I've got these parentheses enclosed within the name of the virtual environment. The next thing is to install Pygame inside the virtual environment. using the command pip space install space Pygame, and then you press enter, and that will install Pygame inside my virtual environment. Pygame has now been successfully installed. The version is version 1.9.6. Each time you install a package in Python, it sometimes checks to see you have the latest version of pip, which is what is used to install packages. If you haven't, you get a warning like I have here saying that I have the lower version of pip. It tells me there's a newer version of pip, which is 20.2.2. So I'm going to install that. It's also told me how to install it. So let's go ahead and do that. I have typed in the command to upgrade pip, which is python space -m space pip space install space -- upgrade space pip. So I'm going to press enter on my keyboard, and that will look for an older version. It will remove it and then install a newer version of pip. So it has completed it. So successfully uninstalled pip 20.1.1 and successfully installed pip 20.2.2. So inside my project folder, which is this folder on my desktop, I have my virtual environment, which contains Pygame installation. Now I want to add the game resources, which includes the images I'm going to use for the game, the sound for the game, and a font. So I've added the resources for the game. This is going to be the font I'm going to use. And under assets, I have the various images I'm going to use for the game. And then under sound, we have the sound for the various aspects of the game. Okay, so these are the assets, the font, the assets, which contains the images and the sound. These will be available for you to download and add into your project folder. So that's it for this video. In this video, we installed Pygame inside a virtual environment. Thank you for watching. Bye for now. Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to implement a basic Pygame setup. To begin, we are going to create a Python file or Python module. That's basically a file that is saved as a .py extension. So this is going to be the main file for our application or game. And then we are going to import Pygame. Before you can use Pygame to create games, you have to import it into your Python file. Once you have imported Pygame into your Python file, the next step is to initialize your Pygame. After initializing your Pygame, you need to create a display surface, which is also a canvas that allows you to draw images on your canvas that you use for the game. And the canvas or the display surface is going to be stored inside a variable. Once you have your display surface created and stored in a variable, the next step is to create a game loop. The game loop basically includes the game logic. It also includes the update for the canvas. So when you have an image on a canvas, each of those images will represent a frame. So with each frame, you have to update the canvas, and you do that inside the game loop. The game loop can also include a while loop or a for loop. It also includes events. An event basically is the action of a player within a game. For example, moving a mouse or clicking a button, that is regarded as an event. A while loop basically is used to execute a set of statements as long as the condition is true, while a for loop is used for iterating over a sequence. The final step in your Pygame development is to quit the game. You must have a way of exiting the game. I've got my text editor open, so I'm going to create a new Python file. So I click on File and select New File, and I'm going to save this file as flappy.py inside my project directory. I've navigated to my project directory on my desktop, and I'm saving this Python file as flappy.py. So I click Save, and you can see my project directory here. Inside the text editor, I've got my assets folder, my virtual environment, the sound folder, the font file, and the new file I've just created, which is flappy.py. So this is where I'm going to write all the code for the game. Before you can use Pygame, you have to import it. So on line number 1 here, I'm importing Pygame. So by importing the library, I have access to all the functionalities within the Pygame library. To initialize Pygame, on line number 3 here, you just type in pygame.init, and that initializes Pygame. The next step is to create a canvas for the game, which is going to act as the display surface. So on line number 5 here, I've created a variable called screen. By default and by convention, screen is the name you usually give to the variable for the display surface. And inside that variable, I am using the method called display, pygame.display, and I am setting the mode for that display. The mode basically is going to be the dimension, which is the width and the height. So inside this method called set_mode, I've got the width as 288 and the height as 512. This basically reflects the image that I want to use for the surface. If I take a look at my assets directory inside my main project directory, I've got the images for the program. So here I've got the background -day, and you can see this size is 288 by 512. So this is what I'm using for my display surface. So if that doesn't cover your screen, you can just multiply this value by 2. To run the Python file in my terminal, so you can see I've got my virtual environment activated. I've navigated to the main project directory, which is flappy_bird. And inside that, we have the Python file, which is flappy.py. So if I press enter, you'll notice that it will briefly display. You can see the display surface quickly showed up. You will also get this text that says hello from Pygame. The reason the display surface only briefly appeared on the screen was because we did not specify anything in the code for it to do. So all it did is just quickly drew the display surface on the screen and then disappeared, because I've not specified any action for it to do after that. So to keep the display surface running, I need to implement the game loop. Inside the game loop, we'll have conditions that will keep the game running, which includes the display surface, until we exit the game. I have implemented the game loop from line number 7 to line number 11. This block of code will keep the game running until it is broken from inside the loop. So it will run as long as the condition set in the while loop is true. It will only stop when the condition becomes false. On line number 8, I have a for loop. So what this for loop is going to do is going to look for any current event that is happening within the program. For example, if you click a mouse, if you move a button or anything, any current event that is happening is going to look for it. It's going to use the get method on that event. Line number 9, we are checking the type of event. If the condition is checked and the event equals to quit, so we're going to call the method called quit on the Pygame, and that will exit the game. On line number 11, we've got the pygame.display.update. This basically takes anything that is drawn in the while loop before the update and then draws it on the screen. Let's say, for example, we draw an image of player number 1 and the background image. So the update method or function will basically take both images and draw them on the display surface. At the moment, there are no images, so the display surface will only display a blank screen. On the updated code, I just type in the name of the Python file and press enter, and you can see here this is my blank canvas. There are no images, that's why the canvas is blank. So because I now have a quit method here, if I click on the X here, the event loop will know that I want to quit the application. When I quit the game, I also had an error here which says video system not initialized. This is because the game has not closed properly. So what I need to do is import a module that contains the system files, which will enable me to close the application or the game properly. So inside my Python file on line number 1 here, I do a comma and then import the module called sys, which contains system files that enable my Python file to interact with my computer system. And I've added another line of code here. Line 11, I've added the exit method to the sys module, which I imported. This will enable the application or the game to close without any error. So I'm going to save this and then we'll run the game again and try and close it. So I've run the game again. So this is the canvas here. So if I close the canvas, I will expect it to close without any error. So I click X and you can see I've got no more error messages displayed. Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to set a frame rate for our game. The frame rate basically relates to the speed at which images are shown on the screen. So it basically determines how many pictures or frame a game draws in a single second. This basically influences how fast or fluid a game runs. Pygame at the moment draws this black screen multiple times per second. I have no idea how many times per second it does that, but we need to set a limit on the frame rate so that we control how often it does that. This is important for video games in order to control the flow of the game. What is a frame rate? A frame rate is basically the speed at which images are shown or drawn on the screen. And this is expressed in frames per second. The frames per second determines how many pictures or frames a game draws in a single second. This basically influences how fast and fluid a game runs. You can also have unstable frame rate. The speed of the computer or the device that the game runs on can affect the frame rate of the game. So the game would look and feel inconsistent if you have a frame rate that is not stable. To stabilize the frame rate, we have to set a frame rate so that the game flows at a controlled pace and runs within the frame limit that has been set. The ideal frame rate would be 120 frames per second. This is a high frame rate and makes the game look very fluid. Any frame rate over 30 frames per second will also be ideal for the game. To set the frame rate, we need a clock object, and the clock object is going to be stored inside a variable called clock. On line number 6, I have created a variable called clock, which is going to store the clock object, which is the pygame.time.clock. The C has to be in upper case, and then we have to implement it inside the while loop. So on line number 14, I am referencing the clock object and I'm adding the tick method. Inside the tick method, I am passing in the frames per second, which is 120. So that is the frame rate for the game. When the game runs, the game is going to run at 120 frames per second that I have set. This can sometimes slow the game depending on how much stuff that you have on the screen and also how well your computer can cope with it. So make sure your game does not have too much stuff going on so that it does not run too slow. Basically, you don't want too much stuff happening on the screen at the same time. I'm going to run the game again. You should not notice any difference because there's no activity going on the screen at the moment, so you can't actually tell how fast or how fluid the game is flowing in my console.